stop what you're doing, because what Papoose just did isn't a cute little moment you scroll past and forget by lunch. This is the kind of move that makes you put your phone down, stare at the ceiling for a second, and ask yourself what kind of man decides that the best way to end a war is to let somebody brand his body in the middle of it. On the same day the world was watching Claressa Shields walk back into the spotlight, with Remy Ma's diss record still echoing through every timeline like a siren nobody can switch off. Papoose walked into a tattoo studio and had a name permanently carved into his skin. Not the name on some contract. Not the name on his birth certificate. Her name. Claressa. And if you think for 1 second this was a simple act of love, I need you to stay right here, because I'm about to break down why this single tattoo says more about what's really going on than 1,000 interviews ever could. Before we go any further, welcome back, and to every single one of you who has been showing up, sharing, and holding it down in the comment section since day one. Just know I see the love, and I don't take it for granted. If this kind of no-holds-barred breakdown is what you come here for, do me a solid. Hit that like button, drop your thoughts in the comments, and make sure you're subscribed with the notification bell on, because this story is moving fast, and you do not want to be the last one to know. Quick housekeeping. As always, this is commentary, opinion, and news discussion strictly for entertainment and educational purposes. Some of what I'm about to cover is confirmed and documented. A lot of it is alleged and comes from circulating reports and online chatter. I'm going to be crystal clear, as we go, about which bucket each detail falls into. Do your own research and understand the difference between fact and rumor, because in this particular story, that difference is doing an awful lot of heavy lifting. Now, to understand why this tattoo landed like a bomb, you have to understand who Claressa Shields actually is, because it is far too easy to forget how much she has already conquered. She is from Flint, Michigan, a city that does not hand anybody a single thing, and she clawed her way out of that place and into the history books on pure will. She is a two-time Olympic gold medalist. She is an undisputed world champion across multiple weight classes. She calls herself the GWAT, the greatest woman of all time, and here is the wild part. The record actually backs the title up. This is a woman who built her entire name on discipline, on skill, and on an unshakable, borderline stubborn belief in herself. And somewhere along that road, while she was stacking belts and breaking ceilings that had been bolted shut for generations, she stepped into a love story that was never going to be quiet, because it came tangled up in somebody else's marriage. That is the part that makes all of this feel less like a fairy tale and more like a slow-motion collision. But before the relationship ever entered the picture, you have to understand what this woman represents in her own lane, because it completely changes how heavy this story sits. Claressa Shields did not stumble into fame through a viral moment or a lucky break. She earned every single ounce of it the hard way. In a sport where the margin for error is measured in fractions of a second, and where women had to fight for decades just to get a sliver of the respect that was handed to their male counterparts. She went to the Olympics, not once but twice, and she came home with gold both times, a feat that instantly sets somebody apart from 99% of athletes who ever stepped into a ring. She then turned around and unified divisions, collecting belts the way other people collect receipts, until the arguments about who the best woman in the sport is basically stopped being arguments at all. Then she did something genuinely unusual. She decided she also wanted to rap. That crossover, the jump from undisputed champion to recording artist, is a massive part of why this saga has so many moving parts, because it pulled business, ego, art, and reputation all into one single room, and the man standing in the middle of that room just happened to be the thing connecting her music ambitions to an entirely separate, extremely volatile history. And then there's Papoose, and if you know real hip-hop, you know the name still carries weight in the right circle. Brooklyn, through and through. A lyricist who built an entire reputation on raw bars and a pen game that people still bring up in arguments about who was really nice. He is the guy who was once talked about as one of the greats, the one who could out-rap half the industry on a Monday morning without even breaking a sweat. But lately, the name Papoose has not been trending because of a new album or a new verse. It has been trending because of a divorce that will not finalize, a new relationship that raises eyebrows everywhere it moves, a cease-and-desist letter that got ignored, and now, a tattoo. Sit with that trajectory for a second. From respected MC to reality show-style drama. That shift did not happen overnight, but it absolutely happened, and the tattoo is just the latest stop on that particular road. And then there's Remy Ma, and you cannot tell this story without her, because she is the other side of every single thing Papoose does. The Bronx legend. The Terror Squad alum. The woman who stood beside Papoose through literal prison walls. Here is a timeline that still stuns people when you lay it out cleanly. They exchanged vows while she was incarcerated, They later did it again on television in front of the whole world, and they share a daughter born in 2018. This is not some casual fling that fizzled out. This is a union with history, with children, with years and years of public loyalty baked into the foundation. So when Remy Ma moves, people listen. And when she picked up a microphone and aimed it at this exact situation, the entire internet came to a halt, because she is not somebody who has ever been shy about saying exactly what she means. And here is the thing people sometimes forget when they reduce Remy Ma to a single line in a headline. This is a woman who has genuinely been through it, and she has never once blinked while the world watched. She came up in an era when female rappers had to be twice as sharp and 3 times as fearless just to get a seat at the table, and she took that seat and refused to give it back. She wrote bars that became permanent parts of the culture's vocabulary. She survived stretches that would have ended quieter careers, and she built her public identity around a very specific kind of loyalty, the kind that says you hold me down, I hold you down, and we do not leave each other out in the cold. So when the man she stood beside for years, through literal incarceration and everything that came with it, is suddenly seen publicly moving forward with somebody else while the paperwork still is not finished, you have to understand that this is not going to be received quietly. Not by her. Not ever. That history is the reason every single word she aims at this situation lands with the force of something far heavier than a diss record normally carries. Let's talk about how we even got to the point of diss records, because the origin story matters here. Shields and Papoose publicly confirmed their relationship in late 2024, and from the second that news dropped, the discourse was relentless. Some people celebrated it. A lot of people side-eyed it, because the man was still, by all accounts, legally married at the time the chatter really started to burn. The timing of when things actually began has been the subject of fierce back and forth, and neither side has produced a clean answer that settles it. Remy Ma has accused the two of getting involved while she and Papoose were still together. Papoose has fired back with accusations of his own, claiming infidelity on her side. Both of them have taken their versions public, through interviews and through social media, and neither of them is budging an inch. That is the fog this entire story lives inside of. 3 people, 2 competing timelines, and a fanbase that is more than happy to pick a side and defend it to the death. And Remy Ma did not hold back early on, not even a little. There is one message in particular that got screenshotted into the atmosphere and is still being quoted everywhere, where she laid the whole situation out in the most scalding way possible. She referenced her own age. She referenced his age. She laid out how long she has known this man, pointed directly at the children in the picture, and essentially told Claressa Shields, with a single shushing emoji as the closing punctuation, to sit down and stop talking about her. Whether you agree with Remy's delivery or not, and plenty of people have strong feelings on both sides of that, you have to acknowledge the impact. It reframed the entire conversation overnight. It turned what could have been a quiet, private, messy matter into a full public referendum, and it set the stage for every single thing that has followed since. Against all of that heat, Claressa Shields made her own move, and it is the exact detail that makes this brand new tattoo so impossibly loaded. She got Papoose's name inked on her body, not tucked away in some private, invisible spot, either. She showed it off at a weigh-in, in public, and then doubled down on Instagram Live, even joking that she should have gotten it done twice. That is commitment on full display. That is a woman saying, publicly and permanently, this is where I stand, and I am not hiding it. For a long stretch, that gesture just sat there, completely unmatched. She had his name. He was walking around with nothing. And look, nobody is arguing that a tattoo is required for love, because of course it isn't. But inside this specific circus, the asymmetry was deafening. She moved first. He didn't. For months, he just didn't, and that silence was, in its own way, the loudest thing in the room. Then came April, and Remy Ma decided she was done being subtle. She released a record called W.Y.F.L, and if you heard it, you already know it was pointed in a way that left very little room for interpretation. This was not abstract. This was aimed. And here is the detail that tells you everything you need to know about how Papoose operates under real pressure. His response was not a record. It was not a statement clarifying anything. It was a legal letter. His attorney, Shelley Albert, sent a cease-and-desist on April 18th, demanding that Remy Ma pull the song down. That is documented. That is on the record for anybody who wants to go look. And Remy Ma's response? She kept the song up. She kept performing it. She essentially looked at that letter and said, in so many words, watch this. When a grown man's first instinct under fire is to send a lawyer instead of saying his piece, that is a tell, and a whole lot of people clocked it in real time. And if the first record lit the match, the second one poured gasoline over the entire structure. She came back with "Wanna Go," built directly on the bones of crime mobs, Knuck If You Buck, an anthem so deep in the culture that just hearing it referenced in this context was enough to make heads spin. The lines were layered. Resale, clearance racks, hand-me-downs. If you have been following along, you know exactly what all of that was pointing at. The idea that one woman got the full, original, fully committed version of this man, while the other is getting the discounted, second-hand, temporary version. Whether that framing is fair or whether it is cruel depends entirely on where you are standing, but strategically, it was devastating. It handed the internet a clean little framework to repeat, and repetition is the single most dangerous weapon in this entire era. Every comment section became a remix. Every app replayed it on loop. And suddenly, all of the heat that had been quietly simmering around this relationship was back at a full, roaring boil. Let's actually sit inside what Wanna Go did, because calling it just a diss record undersells the strategy by a mile. The choice to build the entire thing on Knuck If You Buck was not an accident. That is an anthem, a fight anthem specifically, the kind of record that makes a room stand up and throw furniture, and dropping it in direct proximity to a boxer served as a double announcement. It said, "I am not afraid of the smoke," while simultaneously making the entire internet picture an actual collision. The rapper versus the fighter, the ex-wife versus the new partner, inside a ring with the whole world watching. The layers about hand-me-downs and clearance racks did all the heavy lifting thematically, and they worked because they reduced the entire relationship to a single, repeatable, devastating metaphor. Once that metaphor entered the bloodstream, no press release and no Instagram caption could fully scrub it. That is why the record spread the way it did. It was not the most technically complex song in her catalog. It was the most efficient piece of rhetorical weaponry she had released in years, and it exploded precisely because it gave millions of people a clean way to say the same thing at the exact same time. Which brings us to the moment itself, and reason this story took over everything. Picture the calendar. Wanna Go is out. The discourse is deafening. Claressa Shields has a fight scheduled, dropping back down to middleweight to chase belts. The kind of night where she needs every single ounce of focus she has. And on that day, in the very center of all that noise, Papoose posts a video. The new ink simply says Claressa. He set the clip to Ed Sheeran's Thinking Out Loud, a song literally built around the idea of growing old with somebody. He captioned it with a salute. He tagged the artist who did the work, and he tagged Claressa herself. This was, by every account, his first real public response to the entire season of drama, and it wasn't a verse, it wasn't a clarification, and it sure was not a signed divorce decree. It was ink. That was the play. In the loudest moment of a very loud and very public year, his answer to all of it was a tattoo, and the internet has not stopped talking about it since. Now, before you call me a hater, let's actually look at what has everybody so worked up, because the details matter here, and the fans caught absolutely all of them. Compare the canvases. Remy Ma, the woman he actually married, the woman who held him down through things most couples never face, the mother of his child, reportedly has a whole sleeve. A full arm's worth of coverage. That is a lifetime level statement. The kind of commitment you carry into every photograph, every interview, every summer afternoon in a short sleeve shirt. There is no hiding it. There is no forgetting it. And then you look at what Claressa got. Small. Modest. Placed in a spot that a long sleeve can completely erase in one single motion. And the internet noticed instantly. That's tiny, they said. That's the easy-to-cover model, they said. He can slap a rose right over that the minute this thing implodes, they said. And I am not repeating those lines to pile on. I am repeating them because they are the actual conversation, and the conversation is the evidence. When you give one woman a mural and the other a postage stamp, onlookers are going to do the subtraction. And the subtraction is not flattering to anybody involved, not one bit. This is where the rumors start stacking up fast, and I promised you I would label these things. So here is the label. Alleged, unproven, street chatter, nothing more. A lot of people are reading this move and asking the single most obvious question in the whole world. If everything at home was peaceful and rock solid, why does a man suddenly decide that the only way to settle the noise is to permanently mark his body? Why didn't he do this months ago, when she first inked his name onto her own skin? Why is the timing synced up so perfectly with the release of a diss record that had him trending for all the wrong reasons? People draw a straight line between everyone is dragging us online, and he shows up with fresh ink. And they conclude that this is not devotion, this is damage control. It is a grown man trying to calm a situation down using the one gesture he thinks will play well on camera, and the problem with gestures is that cameras eventually stop rolling. And then there is the money, and in stories like this one there is always a money chapter, whether anyone wants to admit it out loud or not. Claressa Shields signed a major deal, reported at $8 million guaranteed, a multi-fight partnership tied to Win Records with Salida Promotions involved in the mix. Framed the right way, it is a historic crossover. The most decorated woman in boxing history walking into the music business with her name attached to serious, generation-changing money. That is the headline, and it is a real headline. But dig a layer beneath the celebration, and you will find the chatter, and the chatter is very loud. The talk suggests the structure of the deal is the kind that sounds far better in a press release than it does in an actual bank account, the kind where percentages fan out across multiple parties, the kind where the artist may still carry the burden of funding her own promotion, the kind where the win is not nearly as clean as the announcement made it look. Now, I want to be extremely clear about this part. That is rumored. That is the internet's read on a contract that none of us have seen line by line. But here is the part that makes it feel less like noise and more like a recognizable pattern. Papoose is positioned directly in the middle of the business structure surrounding it all. This is the point where the story pivots from pure drama into something that should make every single person watching sit up a little straighter, because money in these situations never stays in the background for long. The way the $8 million announcement was framed, you would think it was a clean victory lap, a champion planting a flag in a brand new industry with a blank check behind her. And the deal is real. Credit where it is due. That kind of guaranteed money attached to a female athlete crossing into music is legitimately historic, and nobody should pretend otherwise just because the surrounding story is messy. But smart people, and especially people who have watched the music business eat artists alive for generations, immediately started asking the kind of questions that make PR teams uncomfortable. Who exactly is taking what percentage? How many hands are in this particular pot? Does the artist end up fronting the cost of her own promotion, while the people around her collect their cut regardless of how the product performs? Those questions do not come from nowhere. They come from decades of documented examples of entertainers, and especially entertainers crossing lanes for the first time, signing the kind of structure that sounds like a fortune in the announcement and hits like something far smaller once the deductions start rolling. Again, I am not asserting that is what happened here, because I have not seen the contract, and neither have 99% of the people confidently orating about it online. What I am saying is that the optics were always going to invite this scrutiny the moment a spouse in the middle of a public divorce was also positioned inside the business orbit of the new partner. That is a conflict of interest waiting to be debated, and the internet debated it, loudly, for weeks. There is another thread being tugged at right now, and I will say it as plainly as I can possibly say it. This is street talk, it is unproven, and I am not here to present it as established fact. The whispers suggest there is a woman attached to that same record situation, and that her history with Papoose may run deeper than the strictly professional. If there is any truth in it at all, and again, that is a very big if, then you would be looking at a scenario where Claressa Shields is being asked to split percentages and share space with somebody whose name is tangled up in the exact same rumor mill as her man. That is the kind of detail that, whether true or completely false, poisons the atmosphere. It means every business dinner, every studio session, every contract conversation now sits under a cloud of weight. What exactly is the dynamic here? And in a relationship that is already carrying this much public weight, that kind of cloud is impossibly heavy to hold. And as if the records, the ink, and the business rumors were not already enough for 1 week, there was the fight itself. Reports were circulating that Claressa Shields might be carrying some kind of injury into the night, and depending on who you asked, it was either a serious concern or a complete nothing burger dressed up in a headline. Some outlets ran with it. Plenty of people dismissed it as a convenient narrative. I cannot tell you with any certainty how hurt she was or was not, and frankly, I am not going to sit here and pretend that I can. What I can tell you is that her head had to be in a dozen different places at once. You try stepping into a ring or focusing on any high-stakes career moment, while your relationship is being publicly dissected by millions of strangers. Your partner's estranged wife is going viral with records about you, and the man you love just answered the chaos by getting your name permanently branded onto him. That is not clarity. That is a storm system with a pulse, and storms this size do not just quietly pass. Which brings me to the part one actually want to sit inside of, because beneath all the spectacle, there is a question that deserves a straight answer. If a man tells you he loves you, and he claims he is serious about building a future with you, what does proof of that actually look like? Does it look like a small marking on his arm that he can cover up with a jacket the next time the wind shifts? Or does it look like a pen meeting paper on the one document that would actually free him from his past? Claressa Shields has addressed this head-on. She was asked about being involved with what people keep calling somebody's husband, and she pushed back hard. Her position, as she has stated it publicly, is that Papoose filed for divorce, that he is serious, and that the process is simply moving the way legal processes move, which is to say, slowly. And sure, divorces drag. Courts take time. Nobody argues that the system is fast. But there is a canyon between the process takes time and the process keeps refusing to reach the finish line. And that canyon is exactly where the skepticism lives. Because let's really look at what signing those papers would actually accomplish. It would end the debate in a single stroke. It would strip away the somebody's husband label for good. It would let Claressa Shields move forward without every headline carrying a permanent asterisk. It would remove the single most powerful weapon the internet keeps using against this entire relationship. If the man is truly done with his marriage, and he says he is, then the papers are the finish line, and the only person who controls whether that finish line ever gets crossed is him and him alone. So the question becomes, unignorably and inescapably, why is the easiest, most decisive, most meaningful action still sitting there undone, while the flashiest, most symbolic, most easily reversible action got done on the exact day the pressure peaked? One of those answers, I'm serious. The other answers, with a quiet shrug, I'm managing optics. And everybody watching knows which one this was. There is a psychological layer here too, and I want you to really hear it, because it is the part most people scroll straight past without noticing. A tattoo is a symbol, and symbols work on a very specific frequency of the human heart. They work on people who want to feel chosen. They work on people who want something public, something visible, something they can point to when doubt creeps in at 2 in the morning and the room gets quiet. And there is a real argument, a strong one, that this is precisely the calculation made by somebody who would rather hand over a symbol than a signature. A tattoo costs a few $100s and a couple of hours in a chair, and it photographs beautifully for an afternoon of validation and a wave of hard-eye comments. Finalizing a divorce costs far more than money. It costs finality. It costs facing whatever is actually left on the table when the cameras go dark. So when we are being honest about incentives, and I promised you honesty from the jump, this kind of romantic theater is the cheaper play in every single sense. It wins the screenshot competition while losing the actual argument. There is a term that gets thrown around a lot these days, and whether you love the vocabulary of therapy culture or find it exhausting, it actually applies here with uncomfortable precision. The thing we are watching is a textbook example of a high-intensity, high-visibility gesture arriving at the exact moment when quiet, structural accountability was being requested. Psychologists call it a grand gesture when it is romantic, and they call it love bombing when the timing lines up with an attempt to rewrite a bad narrative, and the line between those two is thinner than most people want to admit in the middle of the feeling. The tell is always in what happens next. If the gesture is followed by follow-through, by the hard conversation, by the paper getting signed, then it was romance. If the gesture is followed by more silence and more deflection in another news cycle, then it was management. Time is the only honest witness in these situations, and time has a way of exposing the difference with brutal precision. So the real test of this tattoo is not what it looks like today. It is whether, 60 days from now, the divorce that would end this entire public war has actually been finalized, or whether we are all back in the comment section dissecting the next symbolic move while the one decisive action keeps getting pushed to a later date. And if we strip every last layer off and say the true thing out loud, here is what is left standing in the light. A man facing public humiliation reached for the one grand gesture he could fully complete before the next news cycle rolled in, and he called it love. But love, real love, does not hide in a spot a sleeve can cover. Real love signs the paper. Real love closes the old door before it opens the new one. Real love does not wait until a diss track is trending worldwide to suddenly feel brave enough to make a permanent declaration. That timing betrays the entire gesture. If the tattoo came from a place of genuine devotion, it would have happened quietly, on its own schedule, months ago, without an audience and without a reason. Instead, it arrived precisely when the pressure demanded a counter-narrative, and a counter-narrative is not the same thing as a commitment. That is not romance. That is a strategic deposit into an emotional bank account that was dangerously close to being overdrawn. Here is the deeper truth about why this story has people so riled up, and it goes well past celebrity gossip. This is not really about 3 famous people. It is about a pattern that a huge number of people have lived through up close. You have seen it. A person who always has the grand gesture ready, the big public move, the thing that looks amazing in the exact moment it happens, but who, when it comes time for the boring, quiet, unglamorous work of actually changing circumstances, is somehow never around. The person who will show up with the flowers, but never with the apology. The person who will post the anniversary tribute, but will never have the hard conversation. The person who will gladly get the tattoo, but will not sign the paper. It is the same shape every single time, just dressed up in different clothes and a different face. And the reason this saga has people this emotionally invested, the reason the comment sections are this deep, is that we have all seen this exact shape before, and we all already know how the third act ends. So I will put it to you directly, and I genuinely want to hear from you on this one, because the comments under these breakdowns are honestly the most clear-eyed part of the whole internet. If you were in a situation where the person you were dating was still legally married, still tied, still not free, what would actually make you feel more secure? A name on a forearm, or a signed, dated, officially filed divorce that slams the old chapter shut for good? I already know how most of you are going to answer, because most people do not need to think about it for more than 2 seconds. They do not want a symbol. They want the situation handled. A tattoo does not make anybody a couple. Paper does. And is that not the cruel irony sitting at the center of this entire thing? The one kind of paper that would actually settle every argument, silence every hater, and close every loop, is the exact paper the man keeps not producing. Now let's zoom out and think about the stakes, because everybody in this triangle has something enormous on the line. For Remy Ma, this is about legacy and about a story she has lived for years, and every record she drops keeps her squarely in the center of a conversation the internet refuses to leave. She has turned personal pain into pure content strategy, and whether you admire that or find it exhausting, you cannot deny it is working. For Papoose, the stakes are quieter but no less real. His credibility, his brand, and the difference between being remembered as a legendary lyricist versus being remembered as a man who could not get out of his own way. And for Claressa Shields, the stakes are arguably the highest of all, because she has spent an entire career building something that has nothing to do with any of this drama, and every chapter of this love triangle that trends is a chapter where her name is linked to something far messier than a world title. The tattoo did not change any of that. The tattoo just added another item to the timeline. And if we are being completely honest, the tattoo is probably the single most revealing data point in this whole story because of what it forced into the open. It forced the comparison between what a man will do for image and what he will do for real. It forced the question of why the one action that requires no lawyer, no fee, and no real vulnerability got done instantly, while the action that requires all three keeps getting postponed into the vague distance. It exposed, in a way no interview ever could, exactly where the priorities sit. Nobody remembers the caption. Nobody remembers the song choice. What people will remember, months from now, is that under maximum pressure, the man reached for the tattoo and not for the paperwork, and that single choice told the audience more than 100 carefully worded statements about the process ever could. So here is my honest prediction, and you can absolutely hold me to it in the comments. The tattoo buys a temporary calm. It gives the couple a week, maybe 2, of see, he really does love her content, and it has already served its short-term purpose as a deflection. But deflection has a very real shelf life, and when the buzz fades, every unresolved question is still going to be sitting right there, exactly where it was before the needle ever touched skin. The divorce papers, the business deal, the rumors, the competing timelines of when this relationship actually began. None of that gets erased because a man got some ink on a day when the whole world was watching. If anything, the internet's memory has only gotten longer, and the next time this couple trends, all of it comes roaring right back, only louder and with receipts. The only thing in this entire saga that could produce genuine, lasting quiet is a final action, a real, irreversible line drawn in the sand. And so far, on that particular front, there has been a whole lot of talk and almost no ink where it actually counts. And before the couple's defenders aim their keyboards at me, let me be fair about what this is not saying. This is not a declaration that the man does not care about Claressa Shields. It is entirely possible, even likely, that he feels exactly what he has said he feels. Feelings, though, were never the thing on trial here. Commitments were. And a commitment is not measured by what a person posts, or by what they ink, or by what they caption in a soft glow font over a romantic sound. It is measured by what they are willing to finalize, to close, to make irreversible, when it is boring and expensive and requires no applause whatsoever. The entire internet is currently litigating a singular, simple question, and the tattoo, polished as it might look in the clip, did not answer it. It just gave everybody something new to argue about while the actual question sat in the corner, untouched, patient, and completely immune to being decorated away. And that, right there, is the actual takeaway, not the size of the tattoo, though we all saw it, and not the diss track, though we all heard it. The real story is the gap, the enormous, obvious gap between the gesture on his skin and the signature on the page. That gap is the whole thing. It is the entire narrative in one image, and it is wide enough to drive a truck through it. So I want to know where you stand now that you have seen all the pieces laid out. Is this proof of love? Or is this a man buying time in the most public way imaginable? Is it romantic? Or is it the cheapest form of damage control that money and a tattoo gun can buy? Drop your answer in the comments, because I read all of them, and I always pin the ones that make the sharpest points. If this breakdown landed for you, hit that like, share it with somebody who has been following this saga chapter by chapter, and make absolutely sure you are subscribed, because I have a very strong feeling this thing is nowhere near finished. When the divorce papers actually drop, when the next record inevitably comes out, when the next chapter of this triangle breaks, you are going to want to already be in the room. I will catch you in the next one. Until then, keep it locked and keep it real. And one last thing before you go, because I want to leave you with something sharper than a hot take. Watch what everyone involved does in the next 30 days and ignore almost everything they say. The words will be polished, the captions will be curated, the clips will be chopped to look however they need to look in the moment. But the actions, the quiet ones, the ones nobody gets a photo finish for, will tell you the entire truth. Watch whether the papers get signed. Watch whether the business arrangement gets clarified or just keeps living in rumor. Watch whether the next record drops or the next gesture shows up first. That is where the real story has always been, and that is where it is going to resolve itself, with or without our commentary. I will be right here when it does.